any UK or EU bureaucrat that thinks that they can tell me that it's time to scrap this motorcycle,
How dare you!
it will be my decision, it remains my decision, and you can butt out. Hello everybody and welcome back to my garage for yet another rant video. What I'm going to be talking about today is the EU's introduction of ELV regulations and why we should never let this happen in the UK. Now this, as many of you will recognise, is my Triumph Speedmaster. It's a Speedmaster 865, 2016 vintage. It's like many other Triumph Speedmasters of this vintage, but this is my Triumph Speedmaster 865 of this vintage. But at the risk of upsetting a few Triumph aficionados, I have to say that this isn't actually what I consider to be my first bike. I would class this as my second bike. Because over here, this is what I consider to be my main bike, my first bike, my Harley-Davidson Softail Standard. As you can see, this bike is on the lift at the moment. It has been on the lift for quite some time. And yes, this video is not going to be about my inadequacies and my inability to finish a project like this. This is a video about the fact that I should have the right to do it. So what exactly are these new EU regulations? Well, the first thing that needs to be said is that these regulations do already partly exist. They currently are in force for cars and vans, and that applies in the EU. And yes, this was introduced before Brexit, I believe, and does also apply here in the UK. So ELV regulations do already exist for cars and vans. But what's key here is what the EU is now introducing is an extension of this to actually include motorcycles. Now, as I say, this is the scary part. This now means that in the EU, these regulations they have decided are going to apply to motorcycles. Now, as I say, not yet in the UK, so let's go down the route of getting overly panicked here just yet. But there is potential that the UK government could decide to adopt these regulations here in the UK to harmonise with the rest of Europe, make life easier in their view, making sure that there's consistency of policy across the entirety of Europe. But we should resist that. Now obviously they did resist it in Europe, the introduction of these or the extension of these regulations through to motorcycles. It was resisted in Europe. Unfortunately, they didn't win that battle. But that means that we are now at risk, vulnerable, shall we say, to the UK government following suit and these regulations applying here in the UK as well as in Europe. So in terms of the detail of what these regulations actually say, what it is saying is that if a vehicle has been off the road, is not roadworthy, off the road for any length of time, it could be classed as what they call waste. Now, once they've decided that your vehicle is to be classed as waste, that then means that they will enforce that you have that vehicle scrapped. So, for example, my Harley, under these rules, it's been on SORN for virtually 5 years now. That could very well be classed as having been off the road for too long and therefore should be classed as waste. If the Department for Transport decide to introduce these regulations here in the UK, that would mean that my Harley could be classed as waste. This would be their decision based on a paper-based exercise. They would simply look at the DVLA records, determine that the bike has been on SORN for 5 years and decide unilaterally that means it should now be classed as waste. So how would they enforce this? Well, what would almost certainly happen is that having determined that my bike was on SORN for too long and they didn't like that and considered it should be waste, what they would do is they would issue me with a legal notice requiring me to have my bike formally inspected. Now this would no doubt take place at my own expense. I'd have to take my bike somewhere for them to inspect it, and obviously if it was presented in this state, they'd be saying it's not roadworthy, it's been on SORN for 5 years, we're classing it as waste. They would then inform me that I would have to have the bike scrapped, and in order to do that, it would have to be done at a government-approved scrapping facility, and that facility would then issue me with a certificate to say that yes, indeed, my motorcycle had been euthanized. So yes, you could argue that yes, all you need to do is sit there and say, over my dead body, you'll have my bike out of my cold dead hands, all that kind of argument. But the reality is that they would go through a legal process of enforcing these regulations. So I would be served with fines and court cases, and eventually, no doubt they'd have sent bailiffs in to come and collect this bike against my will. So these are regulations with real teeth if they choose to enforce this here in the UK. Now, in my view, this is nothing short of cultural vandalism. As we all know, tinkering in the garage, working on our motorcycles, that's part of the hobby, it's part of what we do, it's part of our identity. For a bureaucrat who's probably never picked a spanner up in his life, to suddenly decide that my bike has reached the end of its useful life, without knowing the first thing about it, what I'm doing, what my intentions are, they can just remotely decide that yes, that this vehicle is now to be classed as waste, and they can legally enforce, under these regulations, that I have it scrapped. Not sold, not repurposed, not passed to somebody else to finish the project, anything like that. They decide that I've taken too long on my project, they can basically say, sorry mate, it's scrapped. I'm not going to stand for this, and I don't think any of us will. Now, I come back to this fact that yes, this is just a potential outcome here. This hasn't actually taken place yet here in the UK. Sadly, it's not the case in the rest of the EU, but yes, if bikers over there are upset about it, I'm sure they'll be looking at what they can do and what action they can take from here. And you needn't think that there's an automatic exemption for historic vehicles either. If a bike is not over 30 years, there's not an automatic exemption. If you class it as some kind of project, there's no loopholes, no way, no route that the EU is allowing to make sure that these bikes can be worked on. So how does a bike ever reach historic status 30 years old if you have an extended period when it's off the road in the meantime? So let's be absolutely clear here. I'm not fear-mongering. This is not something that is actually happening here in the UK just yet, but the potential does exist. The EU has already shown what it thinks of the motorcycle culture, the way that we treat our motorcycles, the way that we want to restore and extend their life beyond what might be considered reasonable by a bureaucrat in his office. The EU has taken that decision. We need to make sure that decision doesn't spread here in the UK. The fact that these regulations do now currently exist in the EU means that there is every potential that it will spread here to the UK, and that's why we need to be mindful of this. Like I say, we don't need to panic, we do need to be prepared. I find it vastly offensive that any bureaucrat in any country can make this regulation. I find that offensive even though I'm not yet directly affected by it. But if the bureaucrats in this country want to introduce it here, they can rest assured that they're going to have a fight on their hands. The potential really does exist that my 2005 Harley-Davidson Softail could be scrapped by government mandate rather than it being allowed to be developed, to be lovingly restored and put back on the road as it is intended. Now, the motorcycle, yes, I've done a lot of work on it. As you can see, it is far from standard. Although it's called a Softail standard, it is not a standard motorcycle. That's because I spent a large amount of my riding life working on this bike, changing it, modifying it, making it suit my needs. The fact that I've chosen to do this again, and the fact that it is taking a little bit longer than some bureaucrat in an office thinks is reasonable, isn't his decision to make. It will be my decision when this project is finished, nobody else's. It will be my decision when this bike has reached the end of its useful life. It's not something for the politicians to decide. It's not something for a bureaucrat to decide for me. Now, if you agree with my position on this, then you should be supporting MAG. So please do join us and help make sure that when it does come to a fight, or if it does come to a fight, we're prepared for it. We need strength of numbers. We need to make sure that we're engaging with the government before they even think about introducing this here in the UK. Waiting until there's a consultation launched will be leaving it too late. We need to be in contact with the government now. And that is why MAG is in contact with the government now. That is why we're having the conversations with officials. It is why we're having the conversations with parliamentarians. This is an ongoing process. It won't be a case of it's a nice, simple, easy campaign that we can point to a victory. It will be another one of those cases where success means that nothing happens. And those are always difficult to prove that we've been successful. Hopefully we will never actually have to fight this, but the chance of us having to does exist, and we can't ignore that fact. If we wait until the government has made its decision and decides to launch a consultation, we all know how reliable these consultation processes are, don't we? Just look at the bus lanes. What was it, 94% of respondents said that they were in favour of motorcycle accidents in bus lanes. So what does the government do? Say, oh, do you know what, we're not going to allow motorcycles default access in bus lanes.